Welcome to another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review. I'm Steve Gamache, and what we have this time is the Harukaze VG-10 Tsuchime or hammered Gyuto 240mm knife. So the way this line is constructed is it's multiple layers, and the center hardcore cutting edge steel down the middle that peeks out from the bottom here. You can see those layers right there. That is VG-10 full stainless steel. Heat treats about 60 Rockwell on that, and they have a pretty good rendition of VG-10 in this knife line. The cladding is multiple layers of soft stainless, and you can see there's a lot going on with this cladding, and it's got a fair amount of polish to it as well. So you've got multiple layers, and you can see when they grind the knife down off this flatter portion here that's got a hammered or Tsuchime or pebble finish to it, you can see that you get the layers going down towards the edge, and where that stops, the layers stop, that's the core steel, and then that shiny part down there is the actual edge bevel. So you can see kind of a semi-regular excuse me, hammered pattern to it. So that's the Tsuchime. Hard for me to pronounce on a Saturday morning. The weight and construction on these can vary a little bit from knife to knife, but they should be fairly similar. This is an all stainless knife, as you can see there, so it's easy maintenance. The weight on this particular one is 245 grams, or 8.7 ounces. The edge length is right about 245, so it's a pretty good sized knife. And that's about 9.65 inches from the tip all the way down the edge to the heel, the back of the heel. This is called the chin. This is the choil, the back of the blade. The overall length is about 14.7 inches in the entire knife. And thickness-wise, these are fairly thin blades. Even this 240 is just about 2 millimeters thick, almost the same as the 210, excuse me. So they're fairly thin blades. They've got a fair amount of stiffness to them, especially in the back half of the blade, given the thinness. And they pretty much just keep that same thickness or spine thickness all the way down until the grind starts. So there's not really a distal taper per se where it starts thinning out like some knives are made. So you can see the grind is very easy to pick up here where it starts thinning out towards the edge, and then these get pretty thin right at the tip. The 240 is going to have a little more meat than the smaller knives, but still that's a pretty thin tip, so the performance is quite good on these. They're not lasers, but they're very respectable performers. And you can see the choil shot right there, so they thin out pretty nicely. So this knife has a little bit of beefiness to it, a little bit of heft to it. The blade height is 50.4 millimeters on this one. Again, that can vary just a little bit. The handles, they're labeled rosewood. They have a little bit more of a brownish kind of color, at least all the ones this is my 5th one I've handled. And the colors are very, very similar, so almost a walnutty kind of color. But anyway, either way, you can see what the color looks like. They have a full stainless tang all the way through the handle, and you've got rivets, stainless steel rivets holding the slide slabs in there, and then they've got what's called a pinned-on bolster. It's not one of the integrated bolsters where it just flows into the blade, but it's called a pinned-on bolster, but the fit and finish is nicely done. Handle size is appropriate to the size of the knife. The handles are slightly different on each of the knife models, depending on the size of the blade, and are appropriate to size, not too blocky, not too round, just pretty middle of the road size-wise, so they should work well for a lot of different people's hand sizes. This is a tall enough blade where even with a little bit wider neck here, given that Yo or Western handle, you still got pretty good board clearance there. So this will handle lots of different hand sizes. Balance point, it's going to be with that full tang handle being a little heavier. The balance points are right about there. So a little bit handle heavy for a pinch grip, depending on your hand size and where you pinch. Mine's about right there. Or a racket grip, you'll have kind of a little bit more neutral, maybe slightly blade forward balance point, just depending on the way you like to handle the knife. Let's get our beauty shot here for the video cover photo. So you can see they've got a lot going on here. The fit and finish, I think, is really well done. The spine has just a little bit of relieving on the corner, so it's not like super rounded, but it's not objectionable either. And kind of the same thing with the choil back here. It's got, it could probably be a little bit more rounded, but it might be perfectly fine for a lot of people. Some people might want to hit that with a little sandpaper and round it off some more. Your call on that. But fit and finish is nicely done. The right side of the blade, as you'd be holding it, it's a little hard to show, but it has laser engraved kanji on it. This particular kanji is not very deep, so it's a little hard to pick up, but that's hard to show. Trust me, it's there. Man, this is hard to pick up. The kanji is there. The left side of the blade, as you'd be holding it, does not have any kind of markings on it or letter, engravings or anything. And you can see a kind of a semi-regular hammered pattern, and then you've got the layers on the grind of the cladding, and then down to the core steel where you've got a fair amount of polish to that. So a very nice looking blade, fairly stiff, as I said, on the back half of the blade especially, given the thinness of it. And let's see here. Out of the box edge, I would say I'm giving these a 5 out of 10. They've all been quite consistent in the way the edges have been built on them. And they're pretty nicely crafted edges. They just don't have a lot of, they're fairly low grit. So while they are pretty sharp, you can get a much nicer edge on these if you want to, give it the full 9 yards on the sharpening sequence and get a little higher, grit to there. It looks like a fairly low grit edge on there. So let's look at the cutting profile on the board here, and this is what's called the edge profile. And you can see that, so the edge profile is just the shape of that edge and the curve of it and how it works on the board for given tasks. So you can see you've got kind of a midpoint tip here between the top and the bottom of the blade, and so that gives you you can get pretty high on a rock before it starts wanting to dig that tip into the board. So this will definitely rock well over all kinds of stuff, and it flows nicely into more of a shallow belly or curve in the middle part of the blade, and then a little bit into the heel where it kind of rolls into that. So there's not a real huge flat spot on this, but it's fairly shallow in this area, so you could chop pretty well with this. Definitely this thing will rock really nicely. It'll push, pull, cut, glide cut. You can do tip draws if you want to, although it's a little bit, you'd have to go a little higher on the heel for that. But so this knife will accommodate a lot of different techniques. So they've just done a really good job with this knife line. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's all stainless. The craftsmanship is good. The steel's good. If you like a Western or Yo handle with the full tang and that's your style, it's a really nice line of knives. So this is the Harukaze VG-10 Tsuchime Gyuto 240mm knife.